thought he was only passing through. Another assignment. Another temporary stop in the cold. A Navy SEAL trained to move forward, never to linger, never to look back. Then a dog appeared, silent, watchful, standing exactly where it mattered most. Not lost, not begging, waiting. Because sometimes the miracle isn't being rescued. It's being stopped before you walk away from what God placed in your path. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Legends. Cold Harbor did not announce itself. You didn't crest a hill and see a sign that said, "Welcome." You didn't feel a shift in the air dramatic enough to register as arrival. The town revealed itself the way winter did in the far north, quietly, without permission, and only after you'd already stepped into it. Lucas Reed noticed this the first morning he walked down from the hill. He was 30 years old, Navy SEAL, still active duty, though nothing about this place resembled the world he'd trained for. His height, just over 6 feet, made him stand out among the lower roofs and narrow sidewalks. But his posture worked against attention, shoulders broad, yes, but carried without display, a body built for function, not spectacle. The kind of man whose strength was visible only if you knew what to look for. A faint scar lay high on his left arm, pale and narrow, old enough that it no longer told a story unless light struck it just right. Lucas never thought about it unless someone else did first, which almost no one ever did. He wore the same thing he always wore now. Long-sleeved digital camouflage, the fabric clean and fitted without being tight, sleeves ending neatly at his wrists. A dark tactical belt circled his waist, holding a compact pouch and a holster that suggested tools rather than weapons. His pants matched the top, reinforced at the knees and thighs, tucked into tan military boots worn smooth by use. On his wrist, a steel watch with a black face marked time with unremarkable patience. He had been assigned here on a temporary winter rotation, training support, cold weather adaptation, nothing that made headlines. Not leave, not retreat. Just a pause between states of readiness. Lucas didn't call it rest. To him, it felt like being placed on a shelf. He walked downhill toward the center of Cold Harbor, boots crunching softly on packed snow. His breath fogged the air in steady rhythm. He moved the way men moved when they had learned, over years and consequences, that wasted motion cost more than effort ever did. At his left side walked Nix. The German shepherd's coat was black and tan, short and dense, built for cold and endurance. His body was compact, muscular without bulk, movements precise and economical. Nix did not pull on the leash. He did not glance at storefront windows or passing vehicles. His eyes stayed forward, amber dark and alert, scanning without urgency. Nix walked on Lucas's left because he always had. It was not sentiment. It was training. Cold Harbor noticed them. Not with curiosity exactly, more with acknowledgement. People looked once, then looked away. They clocked the uniform without asking questions. They saw the dog and understood that this was not an animal meant for children's hands or casual affection. At the bakery, the bell over the door rang once when Lucas stepped inside. The smell of bread and yeast pushed back the cold for a moment. A woman behind the counter, middle-aged, gray, threaded through her dark hair, hands dusted with flour, gave a nod that served as greeting, farewell, and boundary all at once. Lucas ordered a loaf and a coffee. He paid in cash. He did not linger. Cold Harbor respected that. When he stepped back outside, Nix resumed position without command. They moved along the side street behind the bakery, where the brick wall caught what little warmth the morning sun offered. That was when Nix stopped. Not abruptly, not in alarm. He simply ceased moving. The leash went slack, then gently taut as Lucas took one more step before noticing the change in resistance. Lucas turned his head slightly, a reflex honed by years of peripheral awareness. Nick stood still beside him. No growl, no bark. His ears were forward. His weight was evenly distributed across all four paws. His gaze fixed on a narrow space along the brick wall near a vent that breathed faint warmth into the air. Lucas frowned, not in fear, but in calculation. "Nix," he said, quietly. It was not a command, just a name. Nix did not look at him. Lucas applied the slightest pressure to the leash, a practiced signal meant to test attention, not enforce obedience. Nix did not step forward. There were moments in Lucas's past when stillness like that had meant everything. When it had been the difference between moving and not moving, breathing and not. Those moments belonged to other places, not here. Lucas waited one heartbeat longer than he meant to. Snow drifted across the alley in thin ribbons. The vent hummed softly. Nothing happened. Lucas exhaled through his nose and stepped forward again. Nix followed immediately, as if the pause had never occurred. Lucas did not look back. He told himself what he had told himself many times before. Not everything was a signal. Not every pause meant something needed to be addressed. Discipline existed to keep men from being pulled in too many directions by instinct alone. They walked on. The rest of the morning passed without incident. Lucas returned up the hill to the cabin assigned to him. A simple wooden structure with a stove that ticked when it cooled, and windows that looked out over a line of dark trees. He unpacked nothing he didn't need, ate standing, cleaned the counter twice. By afternoon, the sky had taken on the color of old steel. Lucas stepped outside to split wood. Nick sat nearby, watching the tree line. Not tense, not relaxed, just present. That night, Lucas slept lightly. Not poorly. He had learned to function without deep rest, but not well either. His dreams did not replay missions or gunfire. They brought back quieter things. The weight of a decision made too quickly, the memory of moving on because that had been the order, the echo of stillness ignored. Morning came pale and cold. Lucas followed the same routine. Coffee, bread, down the hill. At the bakery, the same woman nodded. The bell rang. Outside, Nix fell into step. Behind the bakery, the brick wall looked the same, except it wasn't. Something occupied the narrow space near the vent now. A dark shape pressed low against the wall, half hidden by a collapsed cardboard box and a ragged scrap of cloth. Nix stopped again. This time, Lucas stopped with him. The shape moved. A dog. German shepherd, younger than Nix, but not a puppy. His coat was dull with grime and snow, the black and tan muted by cold. His ribs showed faintly when he breathed. His ears, too large for his narrow skull, tilted unevenly, one more upright than the other. He did not bark. He did not rise. He watched. There was no panic in his eyes, only attention, the kind that came from learning early how loud the world could be when no one was listening. Lucas crouched slowly, careful not to crowd the space. He noticed the details automatically. The way the dog held his weight, favoring nothing, conserving energy. The faint, pale line around his neck where something had once been fastened, then removed in a hurry. Training. Not military, perhaps, but not nothing. Lucas reached into the bag under his arm and broke off a piece of bread. He set it on the ground a few feet away, then stepped back. The dog did not move. Nick stood perfectly still at Lucas's side, eyes locked on the stranger. Not hostile, not curious, recognizing. Lucas straightened. He did not speak. He did not kneel again. After a moment, he turned and walked away. He did not look back this time. That night, long after the stove had burned down to coals, Nix rose from his place near the door. Lucas woke instantly. Nix stood facing the back window, body rigid, ears forward. He did not growl. He did not bark. He did not look at Lucas. Lucas sat up slowly, heart steady, every sense sharpening in familiar sequence. He followed Nix's line of sight into the dark beyond the glass. There was nothing there. No movement, no sound. Only the wind shifting, changing its mind. Nix remained standing. For a long moment, Lucas did not breathe. Then Nix sat back down, as if whatever had passed had done so without leaving permission behind. Lucas lay awake until morning. The next day, Lucas returned to the bakery with the same bag and the same routine. The dog was still there. This time, when Lucas set the bread down and stepped away, the dog waited until Lucas had turned his back. Only then did he eat, slowly, carefully, as if each bite were a decision. Lucas watched from the corner of his eye and felt something old and unwelcome press against his ribs. Not fear, not pity, but recognition. He told himself he would not stop again. He told himself that winter sorted these things out on its own. And yet, as he and Nix walked away, Lucas felt the weight of that stillness follow him uphill, quiet as a shadow that knew how to wait. The next morning arrived without ceremony. Cold Harbor woke the way it always did, slowly, deliberately, as if the town needed time to decide whether the day was worth acknowledging. Snow had fallen lightly overnight, just enough to soften edges without erasing them. Footprints from yesterday lingered like half-finished sentences. Lucas Reed walked the same road again. Same boots, same pace, same silence. Nix moved at his left side, leash loose, posture neutral. The canine's breathing was steady, controlled, his focus forward. If anything from the day before had registered as unfinished business, he did not show it. That, Lucas knew, was part of what made Nix exceptional. A good working dog did not carry yesterday into today, unless it mattered. Behind the bakery, the vent still hummed, and the dog was still there. He lay pressed against the brick wall, body curved inward to preserve heat, ribs faintly visible beneath fur darkened by snow and grime. His coat was thick but unkempt, the black dulled, the tan muddied by winter. Snow clung to the longer hair along his chest and neck, melting slowly from the warmth leaking through the vent. No collar, no fresh wounds. But the pale mark around his neck was unmistakable. Not a scar from a fight, not a healed bite. A compression line, faded but deliberate. The kind left by something meant to restrain. Lucas noticed it without reacting. Years of training had taught him how to absorb detail without letting it change his breathing. The dog did not rise when he saw them. He did not whine, did not shift forward. He simply watched. His eyes were clear, too clear for an animal that thin, alert, steady, measuring distance and outcome with a patience that did not match his condition. This was not a dog that begged. This was a dog that waited. Nix halted several meters back. His ears stood upright. His muscles held a quiet tension, like a drawn bow not yet released. This was not threat posture. It was identification. One trained, animal recognizing another. Lucas slowed, then stopped. He reached into the paper bag and tore off a piece of bread, smaller than yesterday's. He placed it on the ground and stepped away without looking back immediately. Just once, he told himself again. When he turned, the dog had not moved. Nix remained still. The moment stretched longer than logic required. Lucas felt the pull, not of sympathy, but of recognition. The kind that came when you saw something operating under rules you understood, even if you did not yet know why. He turned away and walked on. Only then did he glance back. The dog had not eaten. He remained where he was, eyes following Lucas and Nix until they disappeared around the corner of the street. The rest of the day unfolded cleanly. Lucas returned to the cabin. He checked his gear, split wood, logged training notes he might never need, ate a simple meal and washed his plate immediately after. But his mind did not stay where he put it. He caught himself, pausing mid-task more than once, listening, not for sound, but for absence. That unsettled him more than noise ever had. At dusk, Nick stood near the door longer than usual, not rigid, not alarmed, just attentive. Lucas noticed, then dismissed it. He had learned the cost of assigning meaning too early. The third morning brought sharper cold. The wind cut down from the trees with more purpose, pushing snow sideways along the street. Lucas adjusted his jacket but kept his pace. Nix tracked the wind with a slight tilt of his head, nostrils flaring briefly before settling again. Behind the bakery, the dog had shifted position. He now lay closer to the vent, pressed so tightly to the wall that his flank brushed the brick with each breath. The cardboard box had collapsed further, offering little protection. Still no movement when they approached. Still no sound. Lucas knelt this time, not close, just enough to lower himself into the dog's line of sight without looming. He placed the bread down again, this time tearing it into smaller pieces. The dog's gaze flicked briefly to the food, then back to Lucas. A decision passed between them that had nothing to do with hunger. Nix took one step forward, then stopped. The stray's ears shifted, just slightly. Lucas noticed the dog's age more clearly now. Young adult. Not fully filled out. Muscles present but underfed. Teeth, from what he could see, were clean. No signs of disease. This dog had not been on the street long. Lucas rose. He did not touch the dog. He did not speak. He walked away again. That afternoon, as Lucas stood on the cabin porch stacking split logs, Nix froze. Not toward the trees, toward the road. His head lifted, his body angled, not forward, not defensive, listening. Lucas followed the direction of Nix's gaze just as a vehicle passed at the far edge of the road below. A dark truck, newer than most in Cold Harbor, clean, no salt scars along the sides. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if counting driveways rather than passing through. Nix did not bark. He sat, perfectly still. The truck continued on, tires crunching softly over snow, disappearing around the bend toward town. Nix remained seated for several seconds after the sound faded. Then, without cue, he stood and returned to Lucas's side. Lucas said nothing. But that night, he checked the lock on the cabin door twice. The fourth morning, the bread was gone when Lucas arrived. Not scattered, not half-eaten, gone. The dog remained. He stood now, though his legs trembled faintly with the effort. Snow clung to his whiskers. His breathing was controlled, shallow but steady. Nix halted farther back than before. The stray took one careful step forward, then stopped. He did not lower his head, did not bare teeth. He waited. Lucas felt the shift inside himself, the point where observation stopped being passive. He crouched again, slower this time. The dog's tail remained still, held low but not tucked. His eyes stayed locked on Lucas's face, not the food. Lucas noticed something else now. The dog's paws. Clean. Not cracked or torn as they would have been after days on frozen ground. He had been moved recently. Lucas stood. He looked down the street. Nothing unusual. No people, no vehicles. When he looked back, the dog had finally lowered his head and eaten. Slowly, deliberately. Lucas turned and walked away, his jaw tight. That evening, the wind shifted again. Nix paced once, then settled near the door. Lucas sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a mug he had forgotten to drink from. He thought of the pale line around the dog's neck, the clean paws, the truck. He did not think of missions. He thought of patterns. And patterns, he knew, rarely announced themselves twice. 3 days in a row, Lucas left food. Each morning followed the same pattern. He walked down the hill before the sun climbed high enough to soften the frost. He passed the bakery, turned into the narrow service lane, and placed bread near the vent where warmth bled through brick like a restrained kindness. He did not kneel. He did not speak. He did not reach out. Old discipline told him that contact, too early, could fracture something fragile. Trust, real trust, was not built by hands. It was built by consistency, by restraint, by allowing the other to choose when to cross the space between. The stray German shepherd never left his position. He could have moved deeper into town. There were warmer alleys. There were sheds, basements, places where heat lingered longer than behind a bakery wall. He stayed, pressed to brick, eyes open, body folded inward like a held breath. People passed and noticed. A man in a wool coat slowed once, frowned, then continued on. A woman carrying groceries paused long enough to adjust her scarf tighter around her neck, as if the sight itself had chilled her. No one intervened. Cold Harbor did not look away out of cruelty. It looked away out of experience. Winter taught the town that survival was not democratic. Not everything endured. Not everyone could be saved. And learning when not to interfere was sometimes the only way people knew how to keep going. Lucas understood that logic too well to argue with it. On the third day, he noticed that the dog had rearranged the cloth inside the collapsed box, not randomly, deliberately. The thicker portion angled toward the vent, the thinner edge folded under his chest. Efficiency. Nix observed from a distance each time. He never approached first, never broke position. His posture was controlled, but Lucas could feel the difference now. The subtle tightening through the canine's shoulders, the way his ears tracked sound longer than before. Nix was not unsettled. He was alert in a way that did not dissipate. That night, the cabin felt smaller. The stove ticked as it cooled, metal contracting with small, deliberate sounds. The wind pressed against the eaves, then withdrew, then returned from a different angle as if testing for weakness. Lucas lay on his back, eyes open, one hand resting on his chest where his breathing stayed even. Nick stood at the rear door, not pacing, not rigid, blocking. Lucas watched him from the bed. Nix's body formed a quiet barrier between the interior of the cabin and the dark beyond the door. His tail hung low but steady, his head angled slightly, ears forward, eyes fixed on a direction Lucas could not see. "Down," Lucas said softly. Nix did not respond. Lucas did not repeat the command. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Nix remained standing until Lucas reached over and switched off the last lamp. Only then did the dog ease back and lie down, positioning himself parallel to the door, spine toward it, face toward Lucas, as if that were the order of things. Sleep came unevenly. Lucas dreamed, but not of gunfire, not of noise. He dreamed of walking away, of receiving the command to withdraw while something unfinished remained behind him, of turning his head once, seeing a shape in the periphery, and choosing to keep moving because stopping had not been authorized. In the dream, there was no sound. That was the worst part. He woke before dawn with the echo of it still in his chest. On the fourth morning, the wind shifted sharply east. Nix noticed it before Lucas did. They stood on the porch for a moment longer than usual, the cold biting through fabric and skin. Nix lifted his head, nostrils flaring, body leaning subtly into the air as if reading something written there. Lucas followed his gaze, not to the trees, but to the stretch of road descending toward town. Nothing moved. Still, Nix did not relax. Lucas placed a hand briefly on the dog's shoulder. Not reassurance, just acknowledgement. Nix accepted the contact without shifting focus. Behind the bakery, the stray lay in the same place. But something was different. His ears were angled back slightly, not in fear, but in listening. His head lifted when Nix appeared, eyes flicking between the two dogs with a sharpness that had not been there before. The bread Lucas placed down remained untouched longer than usual. Nix halted farther away this time. The stray rose, slowly, carefully, muscles trembling with the effort, and took one step closer to the food. Then he stopped. His gaze moved past Lucas, toward the street. Lucas felt it then. Not fear, not certainty, attention. He straightened, scanning the alley, the side street, the gaps between buildings. Nothing revealed itself. The wind carried only snow and the distant hum of a generator. When Lucas looked back, the stray had lowered his head and eaten, but his body remained angled toward the street. That afternoon, Nix refused to settle. He did not pace, did not whine. He moved from window to window, pausing briefly at each before shifting on. Lucas tracked the pattern and realized Nix was not watching the forest. He was tracking the perimeter. As darkness fell, Lucas checked the rear door latch twice. He did not tell himself why. Near midnight, Nix rose suddenly. Not gradually, instantly. Lucas was awake before he knew he was awake. Nix stood rigid, head low, ears fully erect. His body angled toward the rear of the cabin, but his eyes flicked once to Lucas. Briefly, deliberately. A check-in. Lucas swung his legs off the bed and moved silently to his feet. He did not reach for anything. He did not need to. Together, they stood in the dark. Outside, the wind died. The forest went still in a way Lucas recognized immediately. Not peaceful, held. Nix's throat vibrated with the smallest sound. Not a growl, not a warning. A contained frequency, barely audible, that Lucas felt more than heard. Then it stopped. The moment passed. Nix relaxed by degrees, not all at once, and lowered himself to the floor. Lucas remained standing long after, heart steady, mind no longer drifting. Something was close enough to be noticed. That was all he allowed himself to conclude. The following morning, the bakery lane was empty. The vent still breathed warmth. The cardboard box remained. The dog was gone. For a fraction of a second, Lucas felt something tighten behind his sternum. Not panic, not grief, but the cold clarity that came when a variable changed unexpectedly. He scanned the alley, the street, the snow beneath the vent. No tracks leading away, no signs of struggle. Nix stood still, ears pivoting slowly as he took in the absence. Lucas crouched and touched the brick where the dog had lain. The surface was cold now. Whatever warmth had been there belonged to the past. Lucas stood. He did not speak. As they turned to leave, Nix stopped once more. He looked down. There, half hidden beneath a thin drift of snow, was a scrap of cloth. The same fabric the stray had arranged inside the box, folded, placed, not torn. Lucas picked it up, The cloth was dry and faintly warm. Lucas closed his fingers around it, his jaw tightening as he straightened. He did not know where the dog had gone, but he knew this. The silence had not meant absence. It had meant warning. And this time, he was listening. The storm arrived without warning. Cold Harbor had learned to expect snow. But this was different. Wind that came in hard angles, visibility collapsing into a narrow tunnel of light, the world reduced to whatever stood within arm's reach. Lucas Reed pushed against it on the climb back to the cabin, shoulders squared, boots biting into drifts that tried to erase the path beneath him. Nick stayed close, body aligned to Lucas's left, moving with the practiced economy of a K9 that understood terrain as much as command. The leash between them remained loose, not because Lucas guided less, but because Nick's needed no reminder of where to be. By the time the cabin came into view, Lucas's eyelashes were rimmed with ice. The porch light glowed weakly through the whiteout, a small, stubborn square of yellow refusing to be swallowed. And in that light, the dog stood there, not curled, not hunched, standing. Snow dusted his back and gathered along the edges of his ears, but his posture was steady, spine level, weight distributed evenly as if the storm were no more than a passing inconvenience. His eyes were fixed on the door, not pleading, expectant. Nick slowed. He did not bristle. He did not advance. He took half a step back. It was not submission, it was allowance. Lucas stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. The decision came without ceremony. He unlocked the door, opened it wide, and stepped aside. The dog entered without hesitation. Inside, the air smelled of pine resin and cold iron. Lucas shut the door against the storm, slid the bolt home, and immediately moved to the stove. He worked without speaking, hands efficient, movements automatic. Splitting kindling, striking flame, coaxing heat into the room the way he had done 100 times in other places, other winters. The dog stood near the threshold, watching. Not the fire, the door. Lucas pulled a wool blanket from the storage bench and set it down several feet from the stove. He placed a bowl of water beside it, then another with softened bread. He stepped back. The dog approached cautiously, each step measured, as if mapping the floor before committing weight. He sniffed the bowl, drank once, paused, then drank again. Only after that did he lower himself onto the blanket, carefully, deliberately, positioning his body so he could see both the door and the interior of the cabin at the same time. Nick sat across from him. The two dogs studied each other in silence. There was no tension in it, no dominance ritual, no challenge. Recognition moved between them like an unspoken language. Lucas watched from beside the stove, the firelight catching details he hadn't seen before. The dog's coat, once dulled by grime, revealed clean lines beneath. Muscle memory built by repetition, not chance. His paws, though cold stiffened, were intact. His nails worn evenly, not jagged or split. Training did that. So did purpose. Lucas crouched at last, keeping his distance. He extended one hand, palm down, not reaching for contact, just making space for choice. The dog did not move toward him, but he did relax. A fraction of tension eased through his shoulders. His breathing slowed. His eyes, dark and attentive, flicked to Lucas's face and stayed there. Not asking, assessing. "All right," Lucas murmured, more to himself than to the animal. "You're safe. For now." Nick shifted, settling onto his side, eyes half-lidded but alert. He had accepted the newcomer without instruction. That mattered. The storm pressed harder against the cabin as night deepened. Lucas checked the dog's extremities, quick, careful motions, mindful not to invade space unnecessarily. No frostbite, no open wounds. A faint tremor lingered in the muscles, but it was the aftershock of cold, not collapse. The dog endured the examination with quiet tolerance. He did not flinch when Lucas's fingers brushed the fur at his neck. That was when Lucas saw it clearly. The compression mark was not from a rope. It was from a collar, heavy-duty, fitted, removed in haste. Lucas leaned back on his heels. "You were working," he said quietly. The dog's ears angled forward, just slightly. Lucas did not touch him again. Later, as the fire settled into a steady rhythm and the wind began to exhaust itself, the dog rose and repositioned himself. Not closer to the warmth, closer to the door. He lay down lengthwise, body aligned with the threshold, head angled so one eye remained open, tracking the interior while the other watched the seam beneath the door where light thinned into dark. Nix adjusted, mirroring the posture on the opposite side of the room. Lucas sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug he did not drink from, and understood something he had not allowed himself to articulate yet. This dog did not come here to be rescued. He came here because he knew where to stand. Sometime after midnight, the dog lifted his head. Not abruptly, purposefully. Lucas woke at the same instant, breath steady, mind clear. He followed the dog's gaze, not to the windows, not to the stove, but to the corner near the supply rack. The dog stood, took 2 steps, then stopped. He stared at the wall. Not the door, not outside, the wall. Lucas rose slowly and crossed the room. He placed his palm flat against the wood where the dog's gaze rested. Cold, but different. A narrow draft slipped through, a hairline seam where the boards met imperfectly, carrying with it a scent Lucas did not recognize. The dog exhaled softly, once, as if marking the end of a thought. Lucas did not investigate further. Not yet. The moment closed as cleanly as it had opened. Morning broke pale and brittle. The storm had passed, leaving the world rearranged. Snow piled high against the cabin walls. The path down the hill was gone, erased beneath a smooth, indifferent surface. Lucas brewed coffee and set a second bowl of water down without thinking. The dog ate quietly, then stepped outside when Lucas opened the door to assess the damage. He did not bolt. He did not flee. He stood on the porch, nose lifted, reading the aftermath of the night the way Nix read a room. Lucas noticed the dog's stance, balanced, controlled, prepared to move but not eager to. "Stay," Lucas said, not as command, but as invitation. The dog stayed. Lucas shoveled enough to clear the porch, then stopped. He looked at the dog again, the way the animal positioned himself between the open space and the door. "You don't have a name," Lucas said. The dog's ears flicked. Lucas thought of names he did not use anymore. Names attached to memories he kept folded away, precise and untouched. "Later," he said instead. Nix returned to his place at Lucas's side, eyes scanning the tree line. The 3 of them stood there, breath rising in quiet clouds, the cabin behind them holding warmth, the forest beyond holding questions. The dog took 1 step closer to the threshold. Not inside, not away, just closer. Lucas did not stop him. Lucas cared for the dog, without naming him. He cleaned the mud from the fur along the animal's legs, slow and deliberate, careful not to press too close. He checked the pads of his paws twice a day, rubbed warmth back into stiff muscles, and measured food in small portions so the stomach would not rebel against kindness it hadn't planned for. The dog accepted the care without gratitude and without resistance. That was what unsettled Lucas the most. He did not lean into touch. He did not flinch away. He endured attention the way trained men endured orders, present, contained, waiting for the next instruction that might never come. At night, he did not sleep deeply. He lay on the blanket near the back door, body angled toward the threshold, ears lifting with the smallest shift in wind. When the weather changed direction, he rose halfway, paused, then settled again, never fully surrendering to rest. Nix mirrored the behavior. Lucas noticed it the second night. Nix would lie down, eyes half-lidded, breathing slow, but never fully disengaged. When the wind shifted, when snow slid from branches or ice cracked faintly in the distance, Nix's head lifted in the same fraction of a second as the other dogs. It was not anxiety. It was synchronization. Lucas sat at the small table, watching the two animals through the low light of the cabin. The fire burned steady. The storm outside had loosened its grip, leaving the forest hushed and sharp-edged beneath moonlight. "You're both listening to something," he said quietly. Neither dog looked at him. They did not need to. By the third day after the storm, the roads reopened enough for town traffic to resume its careful routines. Lucas made the walk down the hill once more, this time leaving the new dog inside the cabin under Nix's watch. He stopped at the bakery. The woman behind the counter, Margaret, he'd learned her name was, raised an eyebrow when she handed him his coffee. "You found him," she said. Lucas did not ask how she knew. Margaret was in her early 50s, tall and spare, her dark hair pulled back into a knot that never quite held. Flour lived permanently in the lines of her hands. Her eyes were sharp, but not unkind. She had the look of someone who had seen enough winters to understand what they took and what they left behind. "He come back?" she asked. Lucas nodded once. "Didn't think he'd last back there," she said. Not with pity, but with fact. "He's not a street dog." "No," Lucas agreed. Margaret hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "We had a guy come through last week, didn't buy anything. Just stood out back longer than necessary. Asked about strays." Lucas felt something tighten, precise and cold. "What kind of guy?" he asked. Margaret shrugged. "Clean coat, city boots. Looked wrong for the weather, wrong for Cold Harbor." Lucas thanked her and left without another word. On the climb back to the cabin, the forest seemed closer than before. Not pressing in, but attentive, as if the trees had leaned a fraction nearer to listen. Inside, the dog rose when Lucas entered. Not greeting, checking. Lucas set the supplies down and crouched, meeting the dog's eyes. "You're not waiting for food," he said. "You're waiting for something to happen." The dog held his gaze. No submission, no challenge. Understanding without explanation. That night, Lucas did not sleep at all. He lay on his back, hands folded loosely on his chest, breathing steady. Nix and the other dog rested near the back door, bodies aligned in parallel, like sentries assigned overlapping sectors. Sometime after midnight, both dogs rose at the same moment. No sound preceded it. No external cue Lucas could hear. They stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on the tree line beyond the cabin, ears angled forward, bodies still. Lucas sat up slowly. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not reach for a light. He trusted what he was seeing. "This isn't fear," he whispered. The dogs did not move. Lucas remembered something then. Something from a training cycle long past, taught by a handler who had lost more dogs than men and spoke of neither. "Fear makes noise," the handler had said. "Recognition makes silence." Lucas rose and moved to the window. The forest lay still beneath the stars. No movement, no sound. But the dogs remained upright. Minutes passed. Then, as one, they sat, not relaxed, but resolved. Lucas exhaled, slow and controlled, and felt the memory settle into place. This was not a warning of something approaching. It was acknowledgement of something that had already passed through. The next morning, Lucas found tracks behind the cabin. Not footprints, drag marks, subtle, half-filled by drifting snow, leading away from the tree line and angling toward an old service road Lucas had not noticed before. The marks were light, as if whatever had been moved was not large, but unwilling. The unnamed dog stood beside him, head lowered, nose hovering inches above the disturbed snow. He did not follow the trail. He stopped at its edge and sat. Nix did the same. Lucas stared at the tracks for a long moment, then straightened. "Not ours," he said quietly. The dogs remained seated. They had brought him here, not to chase, to witness. Lucas spent the afternoon repairing the fence line along the back of the property, hands working while his mind turned over what he had seen. The service road led deeper into the forest, but not toward town. Toward the ridge, toward nothing marked on any map he'd been given. As evening fell, the unnamed dog shifted his position again. Not to the door, to the corner near the supply rack. He lay there, body angled, watching the wall, not pressing against it, not reacting to it. Just aware. Nix remained near the door. 2 watch posts. Lucas realized then what he'd been avoiding. The dog had not come to the cabin for warmth. He had come because the cabin sat between 2 paths. Lucas poured water into the bowls, set food down, and watched the dogs eat in silence. When they finished, the unnamed dog looked up at him and held his gaze longer than before. Lucas felt the weight of the moment settle. Not dramatic, not emotional. Final. "I won't ignore it again," he said. The dog did not react. He did not need to. That night, when the wind shifted and the forest leaned closer, Lucas did not look away. Morning came thin and bright. The kind of light that made snow look harmless and hid how sharp the cold still was beneath it. Lucas decided to take the dog back into town. Not because he believed the bakery alley was safer than the cabin, but because avoidance had a way of becoming its own kind of decision. He needed to see what would happen when the choice was tested in daylight. Nix fell into step at his left, as always. The unnamed dog walked slightly behind them, head low, movements cautious but controlled. He did not lag from weakness. He lagged because he was measuring distance, scent, exposure. Lucas noticed. The road down the hill had softened overnight, the snow compacted by plows that passed without stopping. Cold Harbor resumed its quiet choreography. Doors opening, engines turning over, breath rising in brief white bursts before disappearing. As they neared the bakery, Nix stopped. This time there was no ambiguity. Nix stepped forward half a pace, then angled his body across Lucas's path. Broad chest square, head level, tail still. Not defensive, not aggressive, blocking. Lucas halted instinctively, one hand tightening on the leash before he realized he was holding it. "Nix," he said, low and firm. Nix did not yield. The unnamed dog froze behind them. Lucas followed Nix's line of sight. Parked along the curb just beyond the bakery's side street was a vehicle Lucas had never seen before. Dark gray, late model, clean enough that the paint reflected the pale sky without distortion. No salt stains, no local decals, no snow packed into the wheel wells the way Cold Harbor vehicles always carried it. The engine was off. Someone sat inside, Lucas could not see the driver clearly through the windshield glare, but he could feel the attention from that direction, the quiet weight of being observed by someone who did not belong. The unnamed dog trembled. Not violently, not in panic. A fine, controlled tremor that traveled through his shoulders and down his legs, as if the muscles remembered something the mind did not want to articulate. He did not retreat. He did not bark. He turned his head instead. Back toward the hill. Back toward the cabin. Nix shifted his stance slightly, widening his base. The message was unmistakable. This was not a warning about danger. It was a refusal. Lucas exhaled slowly, the way he had learned to do before committing to a course that could not be half chosen. He did not look back at the vehicle again. He turned around. The unnamed dog followed immediately, stepping closer now, aligning himself not behind Lucas, but between Lucas and the street. His head stayed angled back until the bakery fell out of view. Only then did his muscles ease. They walked uphill without speaking. The wind moved through the trees in low currents, stirring branches without sound. Lucas felt the tension in his chest loosen, not relief, but confirmation. Halfway up the slope, Lucas stopped. The unnamed dog halted with him. Lucas looked down, studying the lines of the animal's face in the daylight. The eyes were steady, intelligent, scarred not by injury, but by selection, by having survived decisions others did not. "Rook," Lucas said. The dog's ears flicked. Lucas did not repeat the name. He didn't need to. He had chosen it carefully, not for strength, not for dominance. A rook was the piece you didn't spend early, the one you protected, the one that stayed on the board when others were traded away. Rook stepped closer. Just once. Back at the cabin, Lucas secured the perimeter with new intention. He checked the fence line, noted where snow had drifted unnaturally, and cleared sight lines that had felt unimportant before. Nix shadowed him. Rook watched from the porch, body angled outward, eyes tracking the tree line with slow precision. Lucas worked without hurry. When he finished, he sat on the porch step, gloves off despite the cold, and let the silence settle. It did not feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. That afternoon, someone came up the road. Not the vehicle from town, a different one, older, local, worn in the way Cold Harbor vehicles always were. A county emblem marked the door. The driver stepped out carefully, boots sinking slightly into the snow. He was in his mid-40s, lean rather than broad, with a face shaped by long winters and longer patience. A short beard grayed at the edges framed a mouth set into habitual neutrality. Deputy Aaron Hale. Lucas recognized him from a distance, not personally, but by posture. A man used to being alone with decisions no one would thank him for. Aaron stopped several yards short of the porch, hands visible, stance open. "Morning," he called. Lucas stood. Nix remained seated. Rook did not move. "Morning," Lucas replied. Aaron's eyes moved briefly to the dogs, first Nix, then Rook. Something flickered there. Not surprise, calculation. "Bakery called," Aaron said. "Said you turned around before you got there." Lucas did not respond immediately. Aaron shrugged. "Small town?" Lucas nodded once. "What do you want, deputy?" Aaron smiled faintly at the directness. "To make sure nobody's causing trouble." "And are they?" Aaron hesitated. Just long enough to matter. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but there's been activity that doesn't fit." Lucas watched him closely now. Aaron continued. "Couple of vehicles passing through that don't stop for supplies. Don't check in. Don't belong to anyone around here." Rook shifted. Not toward Aaron, toward the forest. Aaron noticed. "That yours?" he asked. Lucas shook his head. "He's staying." Aaron considered that, then nodded. "All right," he said. "If you see something that doesn't make sense, I will," Lucas said. Aaron held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned back toward his truck. As the engine started, Rook relaxed, just slightly. That evening, as dusk bled into the trees, Rook rose from his place near the porch and walked to the far edge of the cleared ground. He stopped, sat, and stared, not into the forest, but along the old service road Lucas had marked earlier. Nix joined him. Lucas followed. At the edge of the snow-packed track, something dark lay half-buried where the wind had scoured the ground clean. A collar, thick, reinforced. The inside stamped with a serial number worn nearly smooth. Lucas picked it up. The leather was cut clean through. Not torn, cut. Rook did not look at the collar. He looked at Lucas. Night settled in with deliberate calm. Lucas placed the collar on the table, beside his watch. He did not try to interpret the numbers yet. He did not rush to conclusions. Nix and Rook took their places near the door. 2 sentries, different histories, same posture. Lucas lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The cabin no longer felt like a temporary assignment. It felt like a position. And for the first time since arriving in Cold Harbor, Lucas understood the shape of the choice he had made. Not to intervene blindly, not to walk away, but to hold ground. Lucas filed the report the way he had been trained to. No adjectives, no speculation, no narrative. Time, location, vehicle description, direction of travel, frequency. He did not mention the bakery. He did not mention the dogs. He did not mention the way his pulse had slowed the moment he turned back uphill. The report went through channels designed to absorb information quietly, process it without ceremony, and decide elsewhere whether it mattered. That was how the military handled things that did not need witnesses. Lucas expected no response. That expectation proved correct. Days passed. Snow fell again, lighter this time, as if winter itself were retreating by degrees. Cold Harbor resumed its careful rhythm, unaware of what had been noted and where that knowledge now lived. At the cabin, Rook recovered. Slowly. Deliberately. Lucas adjusted food portions upward by degrees, watching muscle return to the dog's frame, not in bursts, but in increments that suggested patience, learned the hard way. Rook's coat thickened, the dullness lifting as health reclaimed ground. His eyes remained sharp, but the constant edge softened, like a blade that no longer needed to be drawn at every sound. Nix did not play with Rook. He did not groom him, did not initiate contact, did not offer the loose, social gestures common among dogs at ease. But he allowed him space. That mattered more. The first nights, Nix positioned himself between Lucas and Rook without question, body angled, eyes half open, always aware. It was not distrust. It was procedure. Rook accepted the arrangement without protest. He slept lightly, waking often, adjusting his position when the wind shifted or the cabin settled. He never challenged Nix's placement, never tested boundaries. Over time, Nix moved, not abruptly, a foot farther from the bed, then another. Eventually, Nix took his place by the door again. Rook did not replace him. He remained where he was, close enough to be present, far enough to respect hierarchy that did not need reinforcement. Lucas watched this evolution with the same attention he once gave team dynamics overseas. Trust did not arrive all at once. It revealed itself in posture, in distance chosen rather than enforced. The dogs were not bonding. They were stabilizing. Lucas continued his service remotely when required. Check-ins, status confirmations, readiness assessments that treated his location as a footnote rather than a factor. He knew the truth. He would leave Cold Harbor when ordered. The cabin was not a posting. The town was not an assignment. This was a pause. But the pause was no longer empty. He woke earlier now, not from restlessness, but from awareness. The cabin no longer felt like shelter borrowed from circumstance. It felt held, defined, occupied with intent. One afternoon, Deputy Aaron Hale returned. He parked farther down the road this time, walking the rest of the way on foot. He looked tired, not exhausted, but worn in the way men did when answers arrived incomplete. "You weren't wrong," Aaron said without preamble. Lucas nodded. "They moved on," Aaron continued. "Whatever they were doing, whatever they were looking for." "And the dogs?" Lucas asked. Aaron hesitated. "That's harder." He rubbed a hand over his beard. "There's no official record of a unit operating here. No contracts. No sanctioned training exercises." Lucas absorbed that. "Unofficial," he said. Aaron shrugged, or deliberately erased. Rook lifted his head at the sound of Aaron's voice, eyes steady, posture neutral. Aaron noticed. "That one," he said, nodding toward Rook. "He's not a stray." "No," Lucas agreed. Aaron shifted his weight. "You planning to keep him?" Lucas didn't intend to not answer immediately. "I don't plan," he said finally. "I hold position." Aaron studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "That tracks," he said. He left without asking further questions. That night, Lucas sat on the cabin floor, cleaning his boots with deliberate care. Nix lay near the door. Rook rested closer to the stove, one eye open, tracking movement more out of habit than necessity. Lucas paused, brush in hand. "You didn't need me," he said quietly. "To the dog, or to the thought itself." Rook did not react. Lucas continued. "You knew where to stand. You knew when to wait." The fire cracked softly. "I thought I was rescuing you." Rook lifted his head then, meeting Lucas's gaze. Not pleading, not grateful. Present. Lucas exhaled, the truth settling with the weight of something long resisted. "You weren't lost," he said. "You were holding." Rook lowered his head again, satisfied. Not because he had been understood, but because understanding had finally arrived. The message came at dawn, short, precise, unemotional. "Prepare for reassignment. Stand by for extraction window." Lucas read it once. Then again, he set the device down and looked around the cabin. Nix watched him closely now. Rook rose to his feet, not abruptly, but with a sense of alignment, as if something long anticipated had finally been named. Lucas stood and moved to the door, opening it to the pale morning light. Snow glittered, untouched. The forest waited, not expectant, not threatening, just there. Lucas understood something then that training had never taught him. Leaving did not always mean abandoning. Sometimes it meant knowing what remained when you were gone. He closed the door gently. The days that followed were calm. Too calm, perhaps. Lucas prepared without hurry. Inventory, gear checks, nothing left behind that mattered, except what could not be packed. Rook stayed close, not clinging, observing. Nix remained steady, unchanging, the anchor he had always been. On the final night before the window closed, Lucas did not sleep. He sat on the porch, breath fogging the air, watching the moon climb and descend behind clouds that moved without urgency. Rook joined him. He sat at Lucas's side, not touching, not leaning, just there. Lucas placed a hand on Rook's shoulder at last. Not to claim, not to reassure, to acknowledge. "You weren't saved," Lucas said quietly. "You were placed." Rook's ears flicked once. Nick stepped closer, completing the line. 3 figures, 1 position. When the wind shifted, none of them moved. Morning came. Lucas stood at the edge of the cleared ground, pack ready, posture straight. He did not know when the call would come, only that it would. He looked at the cabin one last time, then at Rook. "You stay," Lucas said. Not as command, as trust. Rook did not follow. He did not whine. He turned instead, facing the cabin, body squared, head lifted, holding. Nix remained at Lucas's side. Lucas took 1 step away, then another. He did not look back. He did not need to. Some positions were not meant to move, and some pieces were never meant to be spent. Sometimes, miracles do not arrive as light from the sky or voices from heaven. Sometimes, they arrive quietly, through instinct, through timing, through a presence that refuses to leave when leaving would be easier. God does not always change the storm. Sometimes He places something in our path so we will finally stop walking past what matters. In our daily lives, we rush forward, busy, focused, convinced that moving on is the same as moving forward. But there are moments when God asks us to pause, to listen, to notice the silent signals placed before us. A person, an animal, a choice, a responsibility that feels small yet changes everything. This story is not about a man saving a dog. It is about how God uses unexpected messengers to anchor us, to keep us exactly where we are needed, even when we believe we are only passing through. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. What has God placed in your life that you may have overlooked? What quiet sign have you been asked to protect instead of ignore? Share this story with someone who may need encouragement today. Leave a comment and tell us what this message means to you. Subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Legends to continue walking these stories of loyalty, faith, and unseen purpose with us. May God watch over you and your loved ones. May He guide your steps, strengthen your heart, and protect you in both quiet days and difficult nights.